What's up, folks? I want to talk about my Gluttonous Tide bow build and why, while I recommend the build, I don't recommend the bow. Let's go through that and I'll explain as well as I can, and I know that's not the best way to start a video with saying don't do this, but you'll understand why. The Gluttonous Tide is a bow that when you gain your maximum frenzy charges, in my case right now 5, you lose them all and you gain them as additional arrows on the next bow attack you perform. So no totems, things like that are gaining those arrows. It's just you. And what that does in practice is right now I fire that many arrows with Blast Rain. If I then put on a pair of booties and get myself some frenzy charges, and once that goes to full, my next bow attack will now fire way more arrows instead. So it adds an additional 5 arrows on top of it. And every time you go to 5, it puts them in the quiver or your bow and you fire an additional set of arrows. Now, you can only have one of these stacked at a time. So if I were to wait this out after I see my frenzy charges go up, you'll only ever get 5 additional. So your frenzy charges will go up, they'll go to 0, they'll go up, they'll go to 0, but you only get that one charge of additional arrows. So now there was 2 there. If I fire, it's still only 5 more arrows. It doesn't keep going, it doesn't keep stacking. You can't get like an infinite loop of arrows to go into the quiver or your bow, because that would be a little bit too broken. The downside of this bow, however, is that while the gaining of frenzy charges is really easy, because I have a 100% chance to crit on this build using brittle, basically every time I attack I will go to maximum frenzy charges with no problem at all. The issue becomes that the bow's base physical damage is incredibly low. So even if you get a really good one, so you get like a 158 with a 20 attack speed, you're looking at 360 to 380 physical DPS at best. In my case, I think I have right around 380 because I have a 30 quality version of the bow. And we're in a league where you have 600, 700 physical DPS bows, you have 1500 elemental DPS bows. The offset for having such a low DPS base of just gaining +5 or +6 arrows really is not enough. When it came to my original version of this build, it was an ice shot build, and the mapping was horrible because the ice shot arrows themselves did so little damage with one arrow that I had to keep switching into some other setup, and it ended up landing on Blast Rain. Blast Rain mapping is actually pretty good with it. All you have to do is just run around. You basically keep your mana flask up so you can keep spamming arrows, and overall the Blast Rain is going to rain down on everything, keep doing more damage, and you can run through maps with phasing super quickly. It feels really good to play. I love the playstyle of the build. You can take some pretty big hits here and there from things charging you like a Bone Roa, and it's a little risky, but welcome to bow builds, I guess, in some nature, especially when I've only invested about 10x into the whole thing, including 6-link. And on top of that, if I had something like a Vitality Watcher's Eye, which is actually why I run a level 1 Vitality, I was going for that, I would be way more defensive because I have so many arrows, so many hits happening. During mapping, I'd pop up right away. I would still get one shot from something because all I have is Grace and Spell Suppression with only 4300 HP. Because I had to lean so heavily into the bow, it was very difficult to then gain more power in terms of defenses, so I couldn't get more life because I had to kind of give up stuff. And we'll go through that out throughout the video. But mapping with this thing is really fun, and I do highly recommend just having a blast and busting through with some good bow builds, but I would recommend getting another bow for this kind of setup. So how did I end up building around the bow? I took the bow and wanted to make sure that every time I attack, whether the attack be barrage or blast rain or whatever, that I would go to maximum frenzy charges, so the next attack would always be maximum frenzy charges. So to achieve that, we grabbed ourselves a 35% version of the bow, so that every time we crit, we have a 35% chance to gain a frenzy charge, and then combo that with a 30% chance, if you would gain frenzy charges, to go to your maximum frenzy charge. So in my case with Blast Rain, I fire a normal of 8 arrows, and from those 8 arrows, I then add another 5 arrows on top, unless I were to anoint Savagery, and from that block of 13 arrows, if 35% of them crit, and then from those 30% gave me max, it's pretty much guaranteed that every attack is going to take me to max frenzy charges, meaning the next attack is always going to be +6 arrows, and that's a really big quality of life boost for this build in terms of using this bow. Now, like I said, the problem is that if you were to use a normal bow and just gain frenzy charges, you would probably be doing more damage overall because you would just keep your frenzy charges. One of the main issues with this bow is the fact that you do lose your frenzy charges constantly, so you can't do the calculation based on having maximum frenzy charges. You could do it based on having 2 or 3, because more likely than not, when you do damage, you're going to be, you know, bouncing up and down and wiggling around your frenzy charge number instead of always being topped off. The other thing that I ran into with this build was the fact that you needed basically 111 strength, 114 dex, or 114 intelligence, and then you needed dex on top of it, and you're a ranger, so it's very hard to get that on your gear. So to compensate for that, we decided to go to the omniscience route, where our attributes, instead of being applied to our character, because that's why we have 14, 14, 32, they're applied to Omniscience. Omniscience is a really, really cool new mechanic with the new amulet, and it really makes gearing some characters that would traditionally be attribute starved a lot easier, and you get a lot more power for what you do. So how it works is, basically think of every line like this +16 to all attributes as just reading +16 to Omniscience. You don't get +16, +16, +16 like in strength and dex. That's just +16 to omniscience. Same with this +48 to intelligence is just +48 to omniscience. And if you have any percent multipliers, those percent multipliers, like something from your utmost swiftness node, is +40 to omniscience and +8% increased omniscience. They do not stack. You can't get, you know, plus all or +20 dex and +20 int. It just becomes one full number. So don't think you can stack it by getting multiples of the same one, like the Beltcraft +20 +20. That doesn't work. You're only going to ever get +20 to omniscience from that. You can see your omniscience number over here in the miscellaneous tab. I have 986. So if you do the math, elemental penetration is that divided by 10, so 98. Really good penetration. And all resist is that divided by 10, so 98 all on there as well. It's really strong. 25% is the better version, so you want the bigger number because your attribute requirements are satisfied by 25% of your omniscience rather than 15 or the lower numbers, so that you can wear your gear a whole lot easier. That's really important to do. That it just makes gearing easier because you're going to need like 440 or something. Sometimes some pieces of gear are going to require up to 800 omniscience. It's really not hard to get, as you can tell. I haven't really gone heavy into it. I've got 48 there, I got a 53 there, I got a 32 there, and I'm able to wear my gear just fine. I think if I were to redo my ring a little bit more, I could even drop the utmost intellect from there and grab savagery, which is what I was working on going to, but realistically this build is kind of stopping here because really I don't want to just switch the bow out. I should, but I don't want to switch the bow out because it was built around that, and I don't want to go about doing anything crazy with that. So we built into Omniscience, and it worked really well because it allowed me to wear all this crazy like stuff and not have to worry about my stat requirements, and gave me that penetration, gave me that all resist. It's really good. So to combo that, we of course wanted to get that spell suppression, so we got spell suppression on our gear along with the intelligence and max life, and some resistances. Most of the stuff I self-bought and self-spammed because it was very easy to get by myself in terms of just using essence fossils or cheap essences or fossils on things. So this one is just a roll that I kept spamming with a couple little essences to try to land something good. Same with the boots, same with the gloves. The gloves I actually ended up buying this version of them for 90C, and they were really good for me because you get spell suppression, flat fizz, accuracy, max life, and you get that 53 dex to even buff your omniscience a little bit more. And the biggest thing that I wanted to explore with the gloves and why I wanted to go this route is the new modifiers are really good for implicits and implicits on the gloves. So for me, I have a 20% chance to intimidate on hit for 4 seconds. I hit all the time, so everything's always intimidated. And we get that cold exposure baked in. Now, this was originally when I was still ice shot. Right now I'm 50-50. I do 50 fire, 50 cold. But when I was ice shot, this was really, really strong because if you get even a low roll exposure on your gloves, picking up one of the cold nodes for cold exposure is -5 additional. You can do that, or you can pick up the elemental roll for exposures you inflict are at least -18 resistances. So instead of having to go and get a Wave of Conviction or a Hydrosphere or something, you could just pick up this Elementary Mastery node here, and by doing so, you basically guarantee that all these exposures from your gloves are -18. It's really powerful, and it really automates that, so you don't have to do something like Wave of Conviction. The only reason I have that now is because I am hybrid damage, so I'm trying to get both of those damages going. If I put a cold to fire in here, I could be more fire than anything else, and that would let me then not worry about that either. So definitely explore options when it comes to the gloves on what you can do in terms of your exposures and getting the intimidates. If you're a spellcaster, get some unnerves. Gloves are really, really cool with this change to the build. The other thing is boots. Boots have a lot of stuff on them as well. They have action speed, they have brittle ground, they have a lot of cool stuff on them. I didn't get there yet. I wasn't rolling for that just yet. I kind of just stuck with the spell suppression one because it did what I needed it to do for me. And realistically, I don't really want to push the build any further than it is here because I've only invested about 10x into it. It's pretty easy for me to liquidate and move on to some other shenanigans. Belt, you know, traditional life, max life, aspect of the spider, a bit of wed, a bit of resistances, a bit of regen. Just needed something to hold me over. I was trying to make a bigger belt, but I landed on this, so I just ended up keeping with that. Realistically, there might be a play with the bow to go with some kind of setup where instead of a Hyries Ire like I'm wearing here, you could wear the replica Shroud of the Lightless and get yourself 6 Abyssal Socketed Eyeballs, put them in there, get a bunch of flat scaling for the bow in terms of physical damage and elemental damage, then do some conversion shenanigans, or just use Blast Rain and just do it that way so you have a higher base damage on the bow. But once again, it comes down to the idea of like, why would you do that when you could just run a much more powerful base damage bow? You get to keep your frenzy charges, you get to then build around that big base damage, whether it be an elemental one or a fizz damage one, and you don't realistically have to use a 380 fizz DPS bow, which is about half the DPS of any other bow that's currently on the market that's actually good for late game. It just isn't worth building around. Quivers are pretty good because nowadays we have a lot of good quiver modifiers. Increased damage with bow skills, crit multi, crit chances I don't really need anymore, so I was going for a better quiver. I bought myself a fractured 42% increased damage with bow skills quiver, and I was going to spam it with some scorns to get crit multi, additional arrows, and then just craft on life. It was going to be a pretty sizable increase for the DPS for this build to get that, but realistically I would be better off just changing my bow. It really sucks to have to keep saying that, but the bow is just not entirely worth building around. As far as the tree goes, we did go Secrets of Suffering. Secrets of Suffering is really strong with getting yourself brittle. That's why, because we have a little bit of cold, and then from there we did a 40% increase effect of non-damaging elements and another 50% increase of non-damaging elements when you inflict a critical strike. And what that means is I basically have a base brittle of 9.4, and even on bosses I'm at like 10.1 or 10.4, meaning I am crit capped without needing a diamond flask or anything like that, which then is a massive generator for the frenzy charges from the bow, and combined with that I'm always going basically topped off, no problem at all. Omniscience is really easy to get, also extra from something like a Lethal Pride, because all these nodes get +2 on top of them, so we get a lot of +4s, +2s on top of those, and then of course something like 20 strength from the added on additions there give you more omniscience. So if you're going to go omniscience and you have a section where you can do this and you get a lot of that base strength, int, dex, whatever version of the jewel you need to use, do it. It's really, really powerful and gives you like, I think this one's giving me like 130 in total, just on top of what I already have. As you can tell from the tree, we're kind of spaced out in terms of a little bit here and there, just trying to inch out as much of the life as we can. We really don't get a whole lot in a ranger build like this because we had to go so heavy into making things like spell suppression work here, get the omniscience from there. Secret Suffering has to be somewhere, and we have to go point blank and all of that. life is very, very short in terms of the pool that we have. We only have 4,300, and that kind of sucks. I wish I could get more, and realistically I probably could if I could drop Hyri's Ire and get more HP on there, but then we lose a lot of damage, which the bow needs to function. And yeah, you've heard me say it a couple times now. Up here we got, of course, the Lion's Fall. Got that nice crit from here, got that nice attack speed from there, along with the Culling Strike for crits, and the Blind for crits. That's also another defensive layer on top of our Grace and Spell Suppression. Because we hit so many times and we guarantee crits pretty much all the time, we do get to enjoy the benefits of everything being blind, and that gives us some more defense. As far as the Tailwind setup goes, we got Tailwind, of course. Tailwind is amazing for Deadeye. We got focal points for the Sniper's Mark, and we do have a Sniper's Mark on hit, so that's really powerful for our single target. Automates it. I don't have to worry about anything there. We did go Occupying Force. I've switched around with Far Shot, Ricochet when I was Ice Shot, Far Shot then afterwards to go for Blast Rain, and then Occupying Force. I figured Occupying Force ended up being the one that, while on paper the DPS number is technically lower, it also feels better because if you're moving, you do get those Mirage Archers that are kind of keeping the damage down as you move around and picking off some strays, as you maybe saw in the mapping video. It's nice to have Occupying Force. This is just kind of a choice between the two. Plus 2 additional arrows, of course, is always going to be strong just for Blast Rain in general, whether or not you're using the bow or not. Plus 2 is always good stuff. Beyond our linkage, Blast Rain is linked to the anomalous version of it, so that we have a cover enemies on Ash, on hit, 5% chance, and when you fire this many arrows, 5% chance is pretty much going to proc within like 2 or 3 volleys, because we're shooting 11, 12 arrows every single time. Everything's hitting. It's pretty dang good. Increased critical damage because we do have the brittle effect for 100% crit, Mirage Archer, cold damage, Wed. Of course, Wed and cold damage could also both be awakened, so you get that sweet bonus from there. A lot more flat end top and no reflect from the awakened. It's very nice if you want to keep pushing a build further. Grab those two, along with increased area effect. Conk effect is the other thing we can swap in, or if we wanted to, we could also run Trinity on my setup because I am 50% cold, 50% fire. I use increased area effect for mapping because it just feels kind of the best, because everything gets hit by the AoE from that, and I just do a quick swap to Conk effects whenever I'm looking to kill something a little bit quicker. And other than that, we've got ourselves a faster casting life tap Wave of Conviction. This is just to gain fire exposure because we are 50-50 now. Mark on hit, Sniper's Hit, Life Tap, Flame Dash. This is our movement skill. I prefer Flame Dash as my movement skill of choice on almost every build because I have 3 charges as a result of having it. I don't like Dash because it's 1 charge, then cooldown. Sure, there's second wind and then all that stuff, but it takes up slots. So here, with the fact that I'm Mark on hitting Sniper's Mark, which is already on Life Tap because we have only 55 mana, due to the reservation not being shown in the UI gameplay hide life and mana reservations. Here you go. That can be turned on and off. It's in the new patch. Because of that, I do want to life tap all my stuff. I only got 55 mana, so when it comes to it, I would rather just use the 34 mana to do my skill, and that's why we actually use a mana flask. And from there, we've got ourselves Vitality, Skitterbots, Precision, Grace. Grace is our defense. Precision, because Omniscience makes it so we have no Dexterity, thus we need to get Precision somewhere, so Precision has to be run along with Skitterbots, giving us back our Chill and our Shock, which we lose by being a Secrets of Suffering. This applies it back on, and a level 1 Vitality because I was attempting to save up for a Vitality Watcher's Eye, drop these 2 points here, put them here, or get 95 and then put the 2 points there, get a Vitality Watcher's Eye. When you're firing 40 arrows a second, it's pretty good to have that life gain on hit, and it's going to be defensively really strong for us, which basically would remove everything besides one-shots, and one-shots do happen when you have 4,300 HP. And beyond that, like I said, the upgrades for the gear are there. We could do a lot more with it if we wanted to, but realistically the next upgrade would be just get a better bow. And I really hate that I have to say that, and that's kind of the final version of this build, because I have played it a lot. I have very much enjoyed it. It's 2 days, 4 hours into this build. I've been playing it for the last 4 or 5 days on stream and some off stream as well, just trying to figure out how to make it work, how to make it worth it. And realistically, the conclusion I've come to is just get yourself a different bow. And, you know, sometimes that happens when you're making a build. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. But you learn a lot on the way, and you'll have a lot of fun. And I definitely love Blast Rain's playstyle. So if I were to come back and revisit this, get myself a bigger bow, get myself a bigger chest, change out this thing so I don't have to worry about frenzy charges, get myself a more wed on there, and maybe go heavy in the omniscience, get another, like, go up to 1,000, maybe 1,200 omniscience, and get that massive pen, more wed. The build itself, I think, is fundamentally the good, strong bow build that it is. It's just not worth building around this one. And, you know, sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens. Hopefully this video gave you some ideas about some bow builds, gave you some information about the Gluttonous Tide, and overall, you know, was informative. If it was, stay subscribed. We'll have another build coming up. I'm going to start Ignite Flame Dash. Yeah, we're just going to leave you with that one. You guys have a good day. Bye. Is this the guy that drops ashes? Or is it the other one? Where's the music? Oh, that was close.
My champion, energize the spheres. Consume. You're gone. Perish. I think
Alright. That's pretty fucking easy.